Welcome, everybody. I'm Anna Sarnik. I do cyber business development for venture capital and startups at AWS. And we're here today joined by leaders of four companies to talk about agentic AI and security, covering everything from how agentic AI is being used in security solutions, how it's changing the threat landscape, and any observability around innovation and adoption of technology in the enterprise. So we'll kick off with the introductions of who's on the line. I will start off with the first name alphabetical order and turn it over to you, Alex.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me, Anna. I'm Alex Schlager. I'm the founder and CEO of Iceberg, and we do detection and response for generative and agentic AI.
Hi, Chris Gursky. I'm the CISO for Tuskera. We're an agentic AI security operations platform focused on threat exposure management and SOC operations.
Hi, Kevin Kiley. I'm president of Area. We are an AI orchestration and security company.
Hi, Ofer Klein, co-founder and CEO of Rico AI, and basically we're the platform for visibility, governance, and security for everything SaaS and AI, basically everything AI that you buy from the outside.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So to kick off the conversation, right, agentic AI is really the conversation du jour of this year after generative AI kicked us off last year. And there's some analysis that's been done where analysts are predicting that by 2035, 80% of the internet traffic will be driven by agents. So, I want this to be a conversation, but to kick it off, Kevin, if you can start us off with your perspective of where do you see an opportunity for AI agents to help close the gap in our industry, whether it's in the products or, deploying it within enterprise customers and environments?
Yeah, and that's a great question. This is a period where we're going to see so many new capabilities coming online, but at the same time, a lot of new threats that didn't exist before, challenges that the conventional sort of security tech stack isn't prepared for and can't solve for. So the role of agents is coming at both an opportune time and one of great need. I would focus on probably three areas. First, I think the idea that they can provide this continuous threat monitoring, detection, and response capability that doesn't exist today, and certainly not at the scale that agents can provide. They will operate autonomously across networks, your cloud environments, endpoints, anything, looking at huge, vast streams of data, logs, telemetry, user behavior, and they can do it all as it's happening. So the fact that they can cover this and spot anomalies, novel attack vectors, things that are happening that maybe a human wouldn't be able to pick up on through traditional analysis or even using SIEM tools is an incredible change. We're not going to be waiting for that human intervention. This will be something that the AI can immediately contain, automatically try to isolate it, pull credentials, do something to block it, and that will all happen within seconds. So really, really critical how quickly they'll be able to do not only the detection, but some of the remediation. Second area I'd point to would be testing. Again, with so many new sort of risks coming online, agents are going to be able to be deployed as red teaming bots. And this is something that we do a lot of at our organization that will simulate the sort of advanced attack behaviors that are coming online now and be able to adapt very quickly as new challenges and new risks emerge. They'll also be able to work continuously, always looking for that vulnerability that might open up and moving us away from doing sort of periodic pen testing to something that is constantly happening and always looking for that vulnerability that might be opening up. And then lastly, I would point to the way that they'll augment our teams. AI agents aren't going to replace security teams by any means, but they'll act as that sort of tireless wingman that can adapt in real time and extend the scale and the capacity of human security teams. They'll have these analysts that are working alongside them that can help summarize and sort of digest alerts, explaining the root causes and even recommending those remediation steps to move things forward. So again, huge change in the way that we'll be able to scale the security teams that we have today to meet these new threats. So yeah, a really, really exciting era. Of course, there's a lot of scary challenges coming our way as well, but it's exciting to think about the potential that AI agents will bring to the security teams.
Yeah, and I think my next context really is going to open a can of worms where we can go in any direction on this. But I think like definitely augmenting the human capability is the big area that we keep concentrating on as a benefit. And I saw a writing around how NVIDIA envisions in a future where 50,000 of their employees are going to be managing 100 million agents, right? So I think when we think about the risk on this one, it really, I don't know, the scale of it, whether it's on the identity side, on the data side, on visibility side, it starts being massive, right? So I think like from my perspective, I mean, Chris, it said that agents are going to drive the next wave of transformation. In our prep call, I talked a little bit about how, from my perspective, it's the next gen infrastructure, which we can talk a lot about. And I'm sure Alex and Offer have a lot to chime in on how that infrastructure posture management gets disrupted. But before we even get into that, you know, today we estimate the services side of cybersecurity to be $100 billion plus industry. And so when we think about scaling and augmenting humans and getting more efficiency, there's a lot of disruption that can take place here. But at the same time, there's reports that recently come out from MIT and other organizations that for the enterprises, a lot of even traditional Gen AI projects, 95% of them have been stalled. So from where you sit and some of the adoptions across your customer base, do you see these projects actually going into full adoption when it comes to AI solution, or are we really still in the early days where it's hard to tell the level of disruption?
Yeah, maybe I can look at it from the SaaS perspective. What we see usually when you have a new technology, you have the first step is that you try to buy from the outside and then you figure out how to do it from the inside. So effectively you have thousands, literally thousands of apps, agentic, vibe coding, etc., running around your environment that you don't know about. So that's number one. Each team is trying to do their best and they don't really know about each other. So that's the number one challenge. If you look at it from the beginning, the business is going to run faster than you, security, run faster than you, IT, and just the only way to do it is to provide the visibility. That's number one. What is connected? If you look at the latest Salesforce breach with Salesloft and Drift, connected apps become a huge problem in the company. So the number one, it doesn't matter if it's human or non-human identity. It could be an agent. What is right, what is wrong, how to limit access, and how to understand anomaly. The next stop is that I don't have enough people. They don't have enough hours in the day and they're not trained enough. That's cybersecurity in general. So even deploying agents, which are by definition not deterministic, is not going to solve the problem completely. The problem is going to be like, how do you utilize agents in a very smart way? For example, we reduce 80% of the effort. We allow 7 minutes to remediate versus a few hours by tier one analyst. So you reduce the problem by 80 to 90%, and now you can take the next step. We really believe it's going to be a stepped approach, not 0 to 1. Number one, understand the risks behind agents, because everybody, I'm going to use it, especially on SaaS where we operate. And the other side, use those agentic technology in order to help your team, to elevate your team to do a much better, much more scalable work.
Yeah, I want to double click on your comment of the MIT study. It sounds alarming that 95% of projects don't make it to production or near production. But if you look at the report in detail, it's worth mentioning the root causes. So first of all, the study had a very small sample size. I think it's the first thing to mention. The second is that only a fraction of those were basically based on technology failure, meaning on the unreliability of agentic AI itself. The biggest two problems, and we see this with the customers we are working with, is and this shouldn't be new, is the data structure not being ready for either Gen AI or agentic AI. So this is why a lot of these projects didn't come to fruition. So that's a general problem enterprises are facing. And we also see the notion of trying to replicate human-driven processes with agentic AI rather than trying to replicate the outcome. So if you try, if you think of a human process that has grown and, being adapted, for example, for regulatory requirements over years, we saw a lot of companies trying to literally replicate the process with an agentic flow versus understanding and articulating what is the outcome this legacy process is creating, and then basically designing an agentic flow that creates the same outcome. So in short, 95% sounds alarming, but if you dig in, then there's only a small fraction that is attributable to the relative immaturity of this technology. There is requirements enterprises have to fulfill where they're simply not there yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, having been on the implementation side for a long time and been part of the teams deploying AI, it's a lot of the art of the possible, and then it's also the excitement around the ability to implement. And then you run into the wall of security, of legal, of privacy, a reality of being in an enterprise that either has regulatory requirements or privacy requirements. And at that point, you then start to slow down and look at everything. Do we have the right skill sets? Do we have a privacy team that understands agentic AI? And I think once you get through that, that's where I think more of the stalling comes from, is more the reality of the implementations, not a failure of the technology by far. We've seen some incredible implementations. Swarming right now is an incredible opportunity, I think. But then we also learned, some of the lessons we've learned is we use the jobs to be done theory that's everybody uses in UX. We do that from a security jobs to be done. And more to what you were saying, Alexander, the outcome, and then they'll design how the job gets done in agentic. But you definitely agree. You definitely have to start with the outcome.
It's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of back and forth between, I think in the technology space, for those of us that are building it, there's almost a pressure, right, to stay on top of the market and have the right buzzwords. And I see some back and forth between whether the solution is actually fully autonomous, and then different founders or technology builders who come from the perspective of, honestly, agents aren't mature enough to be standalone, right? So I think that's where you start getting that conversation of augmenting labor versus replacing any capabilities. And I think, Kevin, you started to touch on that too. So it's really interesting for me to see how this will start evolving, because at the end of the day, as this starts becoming a common infrastructure, and I think, Offer, you talked about this, how the business will start running ahead of it, I am not seeing enough conversation of what that agentic AI based technology infrastructure layer looks like. It looks like when we think about AI and AI security, there is still a lot of concern around prompt injection, for example, which is a valid concern. It's a lot of risk that can enter today, especially for those in consumer facing businesses. But at the same time, in a way, it's almost a new generation of an SQL injection, right? So when we think about the posture management, and Ofer, you come from this space a lot, starting in SSPM, but when you think about what CSPM was, what SSPM is, from cloud posture management, now thinking about agentic AI posture management, I wonder how we start thinking about that evolving risk and shifting the conversation so that folks start realizing that these third-party provided agentic AI technology, for example, will be those new building blocks, similar to how low-code, no-code technology was, et cetera. And it's an open question, so whoever wants to jump in and provide.
Yeah, actually, I'll start exactly where you where directing is, because what we see effectively in the market, and will accelerate, what is an agent is basically a piece of software with access that can manipulate data. So it's pretty much like you and me, just much more and less predictable, that it's much easier to deploy. So you can deploy 100,000 agents. You cannot deploy 100,000 people in 5 minutes. Okay. So, but the fundamentals are pretty much the same. So if you look at like even a modern company, you have X amount of apps that you're going to utilize AI and the agents internally, 3, 4, 5 apps if you're extremely complicated. And then you're going to have thousands of those that you buy from the outside that are SaaS, that are a part of Salesforce or Workday or ServiceNow or Cursor or Agentic. And when you look at it, what do you need to do? You need to do the same fundamentals instead of trying to reinvent it. It doesn't matter if it goes to an MCP, that it goes directly between apps. You need to understand what is it connected to, which you can control. You have to understand what are the privileges, what is right, what is wrong, and then the event monitoring. So even if someone took over an agent got crazy, an agent is malicious, it's the same way as an employee that doesn't like the company starting to steal data or manipulate the data, but in an extremely higher scale. So you need to really be able to build all of this scale into something that is contextualized, that you can make sense out of it. Otherwise, you will just get drowned by false positives and noise.
I think we also should remember that the majority of agentic frameworks, the agent is relatively dumb, right? The agent is mainly an orchestrator. And it is orchestrated by two main things: the human instruction, agent profile, system instructions, etc., and the LLM that basically interprets input instructions and then guides the agent, right? So to Offer's point, doing all of that in addition, one of the challenges is now that we need to classify language, and we need to understand natural language in the security context and understand nuances between an adversarial prompt and a benign prompt. And to his point, the issue could be in the human instruction itself, or the human instruction being poisoned, going to the large language model, but equally the large language model instructing the agent itself. So I think it's important to keep in mind that the agent is a very powerful enabler and orchestrator, but the intelligence, if you like, that it gets comes from, on the one side, from humans, and still from generative models such as large language models.
This is a great point that I don't think gets discussed enough right now, specifically on the natural language component. As we try to contrast these systems that were prepared maybe for monitoring security or systems to agents, which will have some level of autonomy and they're going to be driven by that natural human language instruction, there's so much ambiguity that opens up, and that can create huge risk for all of us. Whether it's like lexical ambiguity, meaning that there's multiple meanings of a word, or syntactic, where it just may not be clear what they're trying to do, or simply just not being clear pragmatically about what the direction or instruction or intention should be based on the context. These are going to cause real problems this year. And I think, again, it's early days. We haven't seen it yet. But, I think that in the next year, we'll probably hear about some really horrible outcomes because of this not being really locked down enough, or that the agents simply misinterpreted. It wasn't a malicious actor. It wasn't somebody trying to do something bad, but that the language effectively created the wrong programming.
I think I may be totally wrong, but Jason Repholz writes a lot about the risks created by AI security, and he's really testing out the limits of prompt injection and testing the limits of agents. And I think I saw some write-up that he did around Google and Gmail. So I wonder if that starts getting into that space. But then also, I feel like the sentiment analysis, prompt injection, a lot of that stuff folks are already thinking about. For me, I come from the identity space, and even though there are technologies that are being innovated here, I almost feel like we're not thinking about the structure of permissioning that also needs to be changed with AI agents or traditional Gen AI to, for example, make sure that there's enough just-in-time access, or that the authentication is rotated after the workload is up and down, etc. So, I guess for you guys as innovators, what do you see when it comes to gaps where maybe we're not seeing enough of innovation in a market when it comes to securing the risks that we're highlighting?
Yeah, it so yeah, this is CSA. I'm actually one of the co-chairs for the AI safety initiative, and this is a topic that near and dear in some of the work that we're doing. You're right. The identity aspect, a lot of the same methods, the same capabilities that we've deployed for security are going to apply, right? The same concepts. But you're right, the technologies do have to change and innovate. But yeah, the identity permissioning, the restriction of permission, principal least privilege, the traceability of the use of the identities throughout the agentic flows, that's going to be critical as we look at whether it's internal audit coming to us, whether it's the customers coming to us saying we need this. I think it's an incredibly hard problem to solve right now as well, because the current tools they're not built for this.
I mean, practical example to Chris's point, right? Non-human identity for an agent. But now we need to not only deal with the non-human identity of the agent, but the identity of the entity that the agent is acting on behalf. So let me give you a practical example. One thing enterprises are doing is they're vectorizing massive amounts of data, right, that they want to use with RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and other methodologies. One thing that happens when you vectorize, you basically flatten, you collapse your data structure in sense of privileged access because everything is now a vector. So if the agent, the agentic RAG process, if the agent itself as a RAG process grabs into that data, you can manage the identity and the permissions of the agent doing that, but the agent has no knowledge or intelligence on whose behalf it is doing that and what that user should have access to, for example, or not, right? So to Chris's point, this is something we haven't really figured out in sense of not only the identity and the permission by the agent, but understanding and controlling on whose behalf the agent is carrying out actions, for example.
Another angle, Anna, regarding what you mentioned, permissions, just in time, etc. A lot of time, the industry, because it's so democratized, the companies do not want to change their API, do not want to change their permission level, because why should I? I want to sell more product than fix the current ones. And once you start having more of these breaches, and once regulators come in, and once you start having this pool, they will have to change. I'll give you an example. When developers connect those tools, N8N, Cursor, etc., we call it the OK messages. Yes, 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 and something is connected. I couldn't care less. I just saved 5 minutes. Okay? They shouldn't care. Someone else should care. And this someone else doesn't want to block them. So you have a friction that will just go bigger and bigger. And the more breaches, like we just saw 2 weeks ago, the more of these, the more we see the actually SaaS providers care. Actually, we are in touch with some of the biggest platforms in SaaS that are using agents, and they really think 2 steps ahead. It's fine that I'm releasing those agents, but if they are getting breached because of misuse, I'm going to be blamed as well. So the big platforms start to think about it, which is extremely encouraging, and I assume the long tail will follow as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we think about, for the longest time, my stage on a stage talk track used to be is that AI, is it really creating a new attack vector, or is it really just simply accelerating the scale of legacy issues, right? And I think over what you touch on is the acceleration of the scale of, you need to know where your core assets are, how are you making money as a business, where is your holistic risk, and then start thinking about access, to your point, both human, non-human, and start building that web to make sure that there is a correct segmentation. I do also think that it is a pretty big risk of, thinking about agent-based authentication or just-in-time access. That's one thing. But then when we talk about NVIDIA's example of managing over 100 million agents within an organization, what about the governance side of identity, right? Which I think lags even more behind compared to authentication or visibility of identity or IDTR. So it's really interesting because then, we start talking about, Alex, what you mentioned of acting on behalf of who. That's a new insider threat level, right? Like, are we going to be in a world of bring your own agent where you now don't know whether it's Alex the human acting or agent on behalf of Alex that may have gotten breached, that has the same user pattern, where we no longer can rely on the traditional machine to machine predictable access patterns versus humans, and there is a new learning that needs to take place because you can't suss it out in normal technology layers. I guess shifting it a little bit to, as you build security technologies and think about including agents in your technology, there's also some talk around, everybody says that they're agentic X, but in reality, maybe there's only 130 or so solutions that are truly implementing agents. I guess from the build side of technology, I think, Ofer, you make a really good point about large enterprises and how they are thinking about implementing agents and making sure that the brand reputation stays intact. Kevin, you mentioned that you're implementing agents as part of your core solution to get into the pen testing area, et cetera. Maybe you could shed a little bit of light of how are you thinking about actually bringing in those agents, and, given the technology maturity and that they may be a little bit dumber than we think, how are you thinking about incorporating this new layer of infrastructure in your products?
Well, I think with any of these tests, we'll start with the OOPS libraries and others to look at what conventional attacks have been out there, but then trying to get the agents to also build on that. And the ultimate goal here is to help them be more effective at finding those vulnerabilities, meaning getting them to sniff around more, collaborate with each other, and really get more sophisticated in the way that they're attacking. So having them be able to learn from what they're finding, go back, rerun the attacks different ways. That intelligence, that learning capacity is probably the most critical thing that we've really been pushing on in our development of the tool. So there will be some aspect of swarming here, using multiple agents that will talk to each other, that will collaborate, and they can be that much more effective at identifying the problems. And I think, again, that's what all of us should be expecting, that is the way that the bad guys are going to be approaching this and finding ways to get in.
We have several agents that we have deployed already in GA, and we started from what we don't do, which means we never train models on customer data because that's a no-go no matter who you work with. And then role-based access, all of those things, that these are the first questions of enterprises will ask you, oh, you have agents. Do you have 1, 2, 3, 4? So you have to start with secure by design. And then the second level that we learned the hard way, an agent, Alex, exactly as you mentioned, is something that is purpose built. There's no one agent fits everything. So it needs to have a specific purpose, specific set of tools, and then you can reach very, very high queues. So it took about 6 to 9 months to train it on multiple areas, from detection and response to plans on how to secure specific applications and identity detection and response. And once it's deployed, without training on customer data, now you can start seeing the magic. You always have to start with those rejections of friction points that the customer will say, no, I understand the value, but unfortunately I can not use it. Once you pass it, the value is enormous.
And I think in that context, human in the loop is one of the most powerful tools, meaning all the successful implementation that we either have done or seen have at least temporarily a human in the loop in the design. Meaning, as the agent starts working, there is breakpoints where a human is reviewing the agentic decision-making actions, etc., and is providing feedback. The agent will store this in memory, and over time, over multiple iterations with the human verification and feedback, it significantly improves the agent in sense of quality and reliability, so that you, after a certain time, actually can let it loose in sense of becoming actually fully autonomous.
It's funny. I think we all agree on the human in the loop part and the importance of it today. But the great irony, of course, that for so many years, decades, humans were the weak link in your security. And now we've done a complete flip to they've become the most critical component as you think about agentic security.
So, I mean, it's funny, right? Because we just said that humans set up agents. So I feel, you just hit on my pet peeve talk track of identity always being the redheaded stepchild in security, because I always found it so interesting that everything starts with human and identity. But for whatever reason, we leave it behind, because I think it's a little bit of a catch-22 statement that we are landing on, of humans are setting up these agents, training them, and then they become possibly the weakest link.
Especially now with the democratization of software development. You don't need IT, you need a coder. Any business department can set up their own agentic workflow. And to that degree, Kevin, the human still remains a large risk, factor, in sense of, if there's no governance, if there are no rules, and anybody happily sets up their agents without central involvement of IT or security, you still have a human-based issue.
I think we're all circling the same point here, but yeah, when we look at how we, allow our customers to build agents and orchestrate those agents on our platform, the questions always come back to, okay, well, how do I know this is going to do this with the right identity, with the right guardrails? And we build a lot of that into our product, but the identity piece is still, to me, the unsolved. And with you there, and I I take it back to like the old days of doing security awareness by running around and sending resignation letters for people that forgot to lock their laptops. And now it's like, okay, well, that's just the security guy running around trying to prove a point. now it's, yeah, my agent can go and resign for you because I can see if I have an agent that looks to see if your laptop's unlocked. What the CEO now gets 2,000 emails of resignation. Like those are all just the possibilities of malicious is just mind-boggling when you get to the scale that AI is going to. And I don't think we're starting to see the breaches, we're starting to see the bad hygiene show up, but I don't think we've seen a true event, like a catastrophic event using AI agents yet.
And by the way, what we saw in the market regarding that in the first 9, 10 months after ChatGPT and like AI became something real, everybody that we talked to blocked it. We said, that's so risky. I don't care about the value. I'm just going to block it. And 5 p.m. I'm going to play with my kids at home, no matter what happens. Fine. And then the business finally understood the value. And there's so much you can do as security or even IT to say no to the business if this is the fundamental element that the business is running on. AI enablement program became the number one program in the modern enterprise today. So one, I cannot block it anymore. That program is dead. What can I do? So now we see the other side where people are literally using thousands of apps, thousands of agents because they said, I don't have the say to say no. And now I totally agree with you, Chris. Now we're starting to see those breaches, like for example, Salesloft and the Salesforce and Drift, etc. We're starting to see those start, and you don't have the the mandatory need in order to secure it yet, like a compliance or regulation, and it will accelerate. I totally believe it will become worse before it becomes better.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was recently talking to a Fortune 100 CISO community leader, and he said that out of the entire community, there was only 2 security leaders that said that they have the asset management, the hygiene, the preparation of what is coming with the speed and scale when it comes to agentic. And I mean, I think like quantum is a conversation that's been happening now for minimum 6, if not more years, right? That's just going to add yet another layer of speed to everything that we're experiencing. So it will definitely be interesting to see how it evolves. So just to wrap up a little bit and talk about, I guess, the new arena of not, doom and gloom and the things that are gaps, but from your perspective as innovators, what is the most exciting to you when you think about the agentic AI space? And what are you seeing, whether it's your teams or the talent that you're hiring and how they're thinking about innovation, or just others in the space and generally the evolving technology? What excites you when it comes to this new infrastructure layer coming in?
So maybe I can start with where I think it goes down to the very simple note of you can do more with less and faster. Deploying those makes your team much, much more enabled. So things that you didn't even try to do, you can. Things that you thought is going to take 2 or 3 or 4 years are taking a few weeks sometimes. For example, I can give you like little example from us. A year ago, we added a new integration to our system every 4 months. Yeah, amazing, another integration. Then we came with another solution, we call it App Factory, that every 2 days. Now with Agentic, training the models on our data in next quarter is going to be every 3 hours. So just imagine the value to the customer that is saying, I need this app to be supported, boom, within 3 hours you have it. There's zero chance, no matter how many people I hire, that I can do it without Agentic.
Yeah, Ofer, I've only been on the product side for 4 months now. And I was a practitioner for the last 15 years. And for 15 years, we struggled with resourcing, bandwidth, skills. I think that's where I'm most excited is I can define a 24/7 shop without having to go outsource it inside of using AI, using agentic AI, using workflows. And the best part is that the ability for my agents to learn over time is incredible. And the reasoning aspects, just mind-blowing opportunities here for security, in my opinion.
Extending on the same point, I think you're both making, I think it's also exciting to consider how this will level the playing field and allow, I think, a lot more small entrepreneurs or other small companies to be able to sort of muscle up to the level of big guys, because agents will give them that capacity and that sort of volume and strength. That's really exciting to me. And I think, again, hopefully it will allow us to see more innovation in maybe some highly regulated businesses or businesses that traditionally had to employ, massive security teams. And for that reason, there was a barrier to entry for other businesses, that this will allow for things to move a little more quickly. And again, smaller entrepreneurs to be able to come in and really shake things up and innovate. That in that sense, agents and agent security and all this potential that we've talked about today could really open up a lot of opportunity for innovation.
I think Sam Altman said, if I'm not mistaken, he expects GPT-5 to create the first $1 billion single person company. And that's exactly what you were referring to, right? So to double click or, reinforce that, I think the democratization of capabilities, knowledge, tooling, whatever it is, it's going to be really exciting in sense of giving access to smaller companies, individuals, entrepreneur, innovators. It's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, for me, what I'm observing, at least on, I've never been on the building side and I'm not technical enough to actually observe it and be firsthand excited. But the conversation that I find fascinating is the question around that: will agents help discover brand new vulnerabilities, or are they just quickly exploiting new attack paths? And in my opinion, right, even being able to have agent to agent learning, like we said, and having them exploit new attack paths that simply a human hasn't yet discovered, but probably someone on the other side, on the malicious side, is exploring. That's probably very exciting to watch when you're running a simulation of a pen test or red teaming exercise, and agents start talking to each other, sharing credentials, and running a new attack. So it's definitely an interesting conversation for me to observe with security leaders of, is it fully autonomous? Is it discovering new vulnerabilities versus, are they just exploiting existing attack paths? Because I do think that they're going to learn to the point where they will discover new gaps, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Using AI to fight AI, or the other side of that coin is they're using AI to beat our AI, and the vicious cycle that is going to become over time. And really, it's going to be tough for us to do anything about it, honestly.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an arms race.
Yeah, I think there's another angle that people don't really talk about, which is a psychology angle. Technology in those cases usually run much faster than people. The worst case that I can think of is self-driving car. I don't like driving cars. I'm awful at it. Drive by itself, go on. But it doesn't, because of regulation, because of psychology, because of a lot of other things. So technology is here today in a much bigger and stronger force than we utilize it, because of those elements that we just talked about. Some of them are psychology. Some of them are making sure it's deterministic. I'm going to be blamed if something wrong happens. And by the way, visibility helps a lot, and explainability helps a lot. If I can explain what happens here and know that, oh, there's a black box, something good happens, that's not good enough. So I think a lot of the work that, us, for example, and many other companies are trying to do is how to make it easy to understand what it is, to explain to someone else in order to run much faster. And I think the better we get at this, the more people understand and trust it. Trust is a huge word in security in general, but in psychology, even beyond that, if we can trust it, and I can be trusted as a CISO or as even a CIO, then everything is going to run much faster. And I think that part we didn't solve yet, and it's going to take time, because psychology, if you look historically, adopting new technologies is always behind the technology itself.
Well, if you look at how much time and money we spent on awareness trainings in enterprises about cybersecurity, right? We will have the necessity to do the exact same thing for AI. So people really understand it's a tool at the end of the day. It's a very powerful tool, but it's a tool, and people need to understand, its advantages, but equally risks and limitations.
All right, so that wraps up our conversation for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And if you have any questions, I'm sure all of us on the line would be happy to connect with you and follow up with any additional information or conversation. Thank you.